Well, jury deliberations are underway in former Trump White House advisor Peter Navarro's contempt of Congress trial. The trial has kept up a swift pace all week long. Jury selection took place on Tuesday, followed by opening statements and witness testimony yesterday, and we could actually see a verdict at some point today, and of course, we'll bring it to you live.
Moving very quick. We're going to have interesting discussion on this, but first, national correspondent Logan Raddick has the latest from Washington, D.C. He's live there now. Logan?
Well, Bob and Lydia, this is the definition of a speedy trial, and in all likelihood, the jury will reach a verdict today. They are currently deliberating, and if they don't reach that verdict today, it could come down tomorrow, but in all likelihood before the end of the week. Now, former White House trade advisor Peter Navarro is on trial today. He did not call any witnesses to the stand, and his lawyers rested their case without presenting any evidence. Navarro's pleading not guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress for defying a subpoena from the now defunct House Select Committee on January 6th. And 1 count is for refusing to testify, the other for refusing to provide documents to the committee. Now, if convicted on both counts, he could face a maximum of 2 years in prison and a maximum of a $200,000 fine. But Navarro says if he is convicted, he will appeal on legal questions about executive privilege and congressional subpoena authority.
What's really on trial is the constitutional separation of powers and this whole broader concept of executive privilege and testimonial immunity. I've said from the beginning, this one's going all the way to the Supreme Court because it's so important. If we don't have a separation of powers, then the partisan Congress can do anything it wants.
And during this trial, Judge Amit Mehta said that Navarro did not prove that former President Donald Trump had formally evoked executive privilege in response to Navarro's congressional subpoena, limiting Navarro's lawyers from using that defense. Prosecutors say Navarro was required to show up to a deposition and invoke executive privilege on a question-by-question basis. And in their closing statement, they said, quote, when faced with a clear decision whether to comply with a congressional subpoena or not, the defendant shows defiance. Navarro would be the second Trump administration official to have a conviction of contempt of Congress, along with Steve Bannon, who's currently appealing that decision. But if Navarro is convicted by the jury today, as he mentioned, he plans on appealing that decision. Bob and Lydia, back to you.
Logan Raddick, thank you so much for that report. Joining us now to discuss is former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins, also with us, former National Press Secretary for the Trump campaign, Hogan Gidley, and also with us, former federal prosecutor Doug Burns. Thank you all for joining us today. I'll start off with you, Doug Burns.
Sure.
So you're a former prosecutor. I want to get your reaction real quick to MSNBC's coverage of the Navarro trial. I always say whoever controls the message controls the masses. So it's so important for the media to be fair and impartial. Take a listen to what former attorney Michael Cohen had to say.
The extent of the damage that Donald Trump causes for those people who get caught up, like myself, in this cult of Trump, this dumpster cult, it's so far-reaching that Peter Navarro has not yet even contemplated the full extent of it.
Ain't that rich? He's a felon himself.
Well, there's not much legally to break down with that. But joking aside, I would ask Mr. Cohen a couple things. Are you aware that these contempt citations have to be referred to DOJ for prosecution, and DOJ very often, the vast majority of the time, does not go forward, okay? And you know, so for him to go into political sound bites is fine. But the reality is this reeks of selective prosecution, in my view, honestly, guys.
Hogan, I want to ask you a question here. The other side is, Democrats have said prosecute, prosecute, prosecute here. And does this kind of give you guys a fear that people aren't going to want to work with former President Trump when you see so many people connected to him facing prosecution, and now we have Peter Navarro under it right now? A lot of people think that that's all this is just anyone connected to Trump, they go after.
I don't think people are concerned about that. You know, when I went to work in the White House and on the campaign, I realized what I was doing was trying to make this country a better place, to make it great again, if you will, and pass policies that made people's lives better. And we did that at every single turn. Look, I worked with Peter Navarro for a long time in the White House. A lot of people liked him. A lot of people didn't like him. Regardless of how you felt, you knew he was a rebel and you knew he was tough. And what this kind of emulates is someone standing up to the deep state and saying, look, it looks like selective prosecution to me. I was given the ability not to have this conversation with you guys because of the protections I get with executive privilege. Now, whether that actually gets adjudicated at the Supreme Court level, as Peter says, that remains to be seen. But that really seems to be the issue here. And when you have Congress itself, when it convenes, it has so many people in the past lying, like Comey, Clapper, and Brennan, and nothing happens to them. It does reek of that two-tier justice system that we've been talking about, and we've seen manifest itself in the last several years.
Congressman Collins, you're also an attorney yourself, so there were some theatrics in the courtroom. At one point, the prosecutor, John Crabb, called Navarro that man while pointing to him, telling the jury he thinks he's above the law. And then you had Navarro, he threw up his hands. Is that proper procedure and etiquette for a prosecutor to just kind of be slinging those kind of accusations?
Well, I'll let the prosecutor speak to that. I've been a little bit of both, but look, it is show. And what's the old saying is, if you don't have the law, you throw facts. If you don't have facts, you try the law, and if you don't have either one, you just sort of pound on the table and yell. Well, maybe that's just what they're doing here in this process. But I got to go back to something that Doug said, and that is this is selective prosecution. As someone who's actually dealt with congressional subpoenas on the other side of actually being a part of a body that issued them, and to have DOJ not enforce them. It was not until the January 6th committee, in all fairness, and I'm just laying out there for Republicans, Democrats, anybody who wants to look, DOJ routinely did not prosecute or did not follow up on contempt of Congress charges, especially for not turning over documents. Can I just bring up the name Eric Holder? Okay, this just didn't happen. And I think now has become the real problem we're seeing is they're taking these contempts out of a January 6th investigation, which everything they try to do leads back to January 6th, no matter what it is. Right. And this is where the problem comes.
Right. Doug, before we run out of time on this segment here, we've discussed this before. Yeah. How often is a case like this, failure to comply, providing documents, testifying, does it rise to this level? And as we've discussed, as a former federal prosecutor, you say not often.
No, as Congressman Collins says, I mean, he was right there, and he saw people referred left and right over and over with the DOJ declining to prosecute. And by the way, this statute, a little trivia point, it's quite remarkable. It's a 1-year maximum. It's a misdemeanor, but it's got a 30-day minimum. So that's very, very unusual in a misdemeanor statute.
Seems like they want to actually put Peter Navarro in jail should he be found guilty, and he's saying that is not very common. But gentlemen, Doug Collins, Hogan Gidley, Doug Burns, thank you for joining us here.